I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we uncover a gripping 1933 murder mystery with a wonderful author by the name of Jon Gaskins and his riveting book, With Full Intent. This is an historical thriller that follows Deputy Kendricks as he navigates racial prejudice and investigative challenges to solve a brutal quadruple murder. Join us as we delve into this captivating tale of justice, corruption, and personal conflict. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. And we thank the folks at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Jon, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
Yes, sir. Good to see you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Seems like in 2024, 4 people are murdered, stabbed to death, shot to death, whatever, every day. It's not a big deal. But, you know, back in 1933, 4 people murdered, stabbed to death was a huge deal, and people still talk about it today. And this is the true crime that your book is based upon. Tell us a little bit about that crime from decades and decades ago.
On the eve of April Fool's Day, 1933, a brutal quadruple murder did occur in La Crosse, Virginia, Southside Virginia. 4 wealthy farmers were found dead, shot and beat to death by an African-American farmhand the following morning. It was a crime that's never been seen by that region before. It did grip the region. And even today, it is talked about in newspaper articles in the community, and it's never been solved, and it continues to captivate people's interest.
Now, you've had a career in law enforcement. Is this one of the cases you heard about during your tenure?
I grew up around this. My grandparents lived not too far from the crime scene, and they spoke about it often. It was often the topic of conversation when I went down there to visit, and we would also go visit the crime scene. Mm-hmm. And so it's always been in my mind. It's been in my upbringing, and then eventually I inherited the collected information of my grandparents and mother, and I decided to take a closer look at it to examine the case in earnest. And decided I didn't have enough to go with a true crime novel, but I would have to fictionalize it, and that's what I eventually did.
Now, is this an almost true crime story? Do you feel like in many ways you have solved it, but you just can't prove it?
I do. I think the prime suspect in my novel was the responsible party, one of the responsible parties back in 1933. I have little doubt of that. I think the other suspects, it's questionable, but I certainly think in my prime suspect, I have solved this crime.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's give the folks an overview of what your book, Full Intent, is about. We've given them bits and pieces and jumped into the conversation, but let's give them an overview.
Well, so what happened was there were 3 farmers. They were wealthy farmers. They were elderly. And so they can no longer do the labor of the farm. And they had to hire a younger relative of theirs. They didn't trust banks. And so all of their money went into a safe that was located inside the house. They were successful farmers. And so they had quite a bit. It was estimated they had maybe $35,000 in gold and currency in that safe. They hired a younger relative, and I believe that younger relative probably slipped up and gave information to somebody who then planned this crime out one evening about 7:30 or 8 in the evening. They were visited, and most likely by family. They didn't trust anyone after hours, and so they usually didn't open the door for people. They seemed to have full trust in whoever showed up at the house, even going out to the smokehouse to get a ham. And so from that point, after the crime scene was discovered, people were allowed to mill around for the entire weekend. And so evidence was lost. Procedural there were procedural errors in how this case was investigated. And so in my book, Deputy Kendricks comes along, and he has to overcome these issues: depression era politics, ineptitude, racial prejudice, to seek out the truth. Um, it wasn't and so law enforcement back in those days were in their infantile stages when it came to investigating crimes of this magnitude. And so there a lot of mistakes were made. It's not that they didn't try to find who was responsible, as they didn't understand how to. And so it kind of slipped in the cracks. It was never solved. And I used the information, the facts that I have, to fictionalize the ending. But I believe that at least one suspect is our true suspect in real life.
Very, very cool. And what was that suspect's connection to the family? Just a friend of the nephew or something?
So the nephew that they hired on, it was his brother.
Okay. Very,
So
very interesting.
yeah, and so it makes sense that one brother's working in the textile industries. They're impoverished. It's the depression, and one is taken in by wealthy farmers that he's not going to let slip. That, hey, this is how successful these farmers are. This is how successful we are.
Yeah, exactly. They've got $35,000 worth of
Yes,
gold and cash in the vault in the basement. And that's like $3.5 million today, I'd presume. Something.
absolutely.
Yeah, that
So
was a lot of money in 1933 when nobody had any money. That's for sure. This is an amazing story. You've done a wonderful job in crafting it and taking those real life events and giving it kind of a modern twist with your investigative techniques and so forth. Have you envisioned this as a film?
I have. I've envisioned this from the beginning as a film or miniseries.
Yeah.
And so that was just kind of on the back burner of my mind as I journeyed through writing this book and bringing it to fruition.
Wonderful, wonderful. Tell us a little bit about your career in law enforcement.
Well, I've been in law enforcement now for 24 years. 10 of those years were in the federal government.
Mhm.
I've done numerous investigations, low-level investigations, high-profile investigations. My tenure in the federal government, I dealt with investigations on the federal level as well as executive protection. I'm an instructor in several disciplines, so I've made my rounds around the law enforcement community as it goes in my in my experiences in this profession.
Awesome, awesome. Did it help in writing your book?
Oh, absolutely. All of my training, my formal education, the various academies I've attended, specialized training throughout my tenure here in law enforcement, they all came together to produce this book.
Absolutely. And you can tell through the realism of the investigation in the book that you are a pro, both in writing and in law enforcement. Who plays Deputy Kendricks in the movie? I'd like to be considered, of
Oh
course.
gosh,
But
who does play him? That's a good question. I'm not sure which actor would occupy that role. Mark Wahlberg comes to mind only because I watch his movies. I've enjoyed his movies. He's assumed similar roles
right.
in this type of thing. So I think he would be a great actor.
I think he'd be great. He's a very intense performer, and he really gives a sense of realism. Tell
Yeah.
us about your writing career now. Is this your first book? Is this the beginning of a career? Are we going to see more books? Tell us a little bit about your journey
Well,
there.
this is my first novel. I've written some ethics-based articles for law enforcement magazines, but this is my first novel, and I certainly am looking forward to writing another book. It was a fun journey. I enjoyed it, and I'm ready to start on another one.
Wonderful, wonderful. And this, if you want to blend true crime and fiction, there's endless opportunities out there. Yeah,
Absolutely.
without a doubt. Now, in your story, the murder of the state's key witness hinders the investigation, of course. Was that a real life aspect of this case, or is that something you invented?
No, that was an actual crime as well. And this poor victim was the girlfriend of the prime suspect,
Hmm.
and who ended up murdered across state lines in Roanoke Rapids. In my looking into this case and newspaper clippings and things of that nature, there were bits and pieces of information that I've been able to draw from that that again supports my in the prime suspect here, my opinion that this is the real life suspect, one of them. It just supports that opinion. And so I wanted to make everything as realistic as possible, where we didn't have facts, to bridge them with my experiences in this profession and how would this most likely be in real life. I've incorporated that into the novel.
So do you assume that the suspect killed his sister to keep her from coming forward?
I do. I believe she discovered some information. In fact, there was a gun in her house. Her mother owned it, and that gun went missing during the original murders.
Hmm.
At some point, it ended up back in the house. I think she learned something and was going to say something. The multiple stabbings of this victim, that's anger retaliatory typological behavior. That somebody was very angry at her and felt betrayed by whatever she did. And I think the cutting of the throat was a kind of a sign to others that don't talk.
That's a personal, intimate way to kill someone. It takes a lot of effort, and it's particularly gruesome, and it sounds like somebody with a grudge. Yeah. And
And
like,
yes, and in the book and in real life, later on, the body is removed from its hiding place, and the blue jacket belonging to the victim is hung on a tree branch to flag somebody down. And I've equated that to the honeymoon phase of a domestic violence situation. I think afterwards, the guilty party felt remorse, still had feelings for this girl, and wanted her found. So it all comes together in my book as we get towards the end and who did this.
also, in real life, was the suspect ever brought to justice?
In real life, no, there were never any convictions, and after the witness was killed, the case kind of died. Went
Amazing.
cold.
Amazing story. Jon Gaskins is a real life criminal investigator, and he has put together a real life book about a criminal investigation from decades ago, from 1933, as a matter of fact. The book is called With Full Intent. It is an historical thriller. It follows Deputy Kendricks as he navigates racial prejudice and investigative challenges as he works to solve a brutal quadruple murder. You will love this book. Hollywood, if you're listening, this is a film ready to go. Jon, thanks so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you for having me, sir. It was a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time. This time, until next time, on Spotlight.